Govinda, 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 Govinda. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sandhivadi Paschatya Dastar. Now you can see Srila Prabhupada. That makes everything auspicious. Just by chanting Prabhupada's pranam mantra, Prabhupada is present, everything becomes auspicious. If we first glorify the pure devotee, that makes everything auspicious. Wherever the pure devotee is present, that makes everything auspicious. So we always begin by glorifying Prabhupada. And then we seek his blessings, that we can speak something. And you can seek his blessings that you can hear something, not just hear superficially, but hear in a way that can purify you. So we're going to continue reading from selected purports on the story of Dhruva Maharaj. And there's one point that I didn't make yesterday that I wanted to make, and it's a point that I've made many times before, but it comes up in this story. So, King Uttanapad had two queens, and Suruchi was the stepmother of Dhruva, and Suniti was his mother. And as we said yesterday, Suruchi said that only when you take birth from my womb will you be favored by your father. And so Dhruva was very upset. He went to his mother. They discussed this, and she said, I'm a secondary queen. Your father has more affection for Suruchi than he has for me. So, as I remember, Suruchi said, if you want to be blessed, then you have to get the blessings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then you can take birth in my womb, and then you can have the affection of your father being my son. So, Suniti, Dhruva's mother, agreed with that idea. Now, as we know, Dhruva was very upset, and very angry with both his father and his stepmother. And Suniti said something very, very important. She said, if you're angry or upset or hateful or envious of anyone, it's not good because you have to experience that pain yourself. And there's a saying, I believe it's a Bengali saying, that if you kill a skunk, for those of you who don't know, I was just in Australia and I gave an example of a skunk. I believe it was Australia. I gave an example of a skunk and they said, what is a skunk? And what does a skunk smell like? So skunks are animals which, to defend themselves, they spray an odor that it's so obnoxious that no one can go near them. So if you kill a skunk, that odor sticks to your hand. So if you're hateful of someone, that odor sticks to your hand. The odor of hate sticks to your hand. Or if we're envious, the odor of envy sticks to our hand. So Suniti was saying that you shouldn't be hateful of anyone because you will have to suffer for that hatred. So it's very good instruction. And it's kind of like instant universal karma, that whatever we do wrong, we immediately suffer for it. So we all know envy is very painful, but if I'm envious of someone, it's very painful for me because I experience that envy. So in that way, there's immediate karmic reaction. I experience envy. If I hate you, I experience the hatred. If I love you, I experience the love. So that's what Suniti was telling Dhruva. Don't hate anybody, because you will experience your own hatred, and you will be the one who suffers even more than the person you hate. Or the person you hate may not suffer at all. So that is it's something to think about, because sometimes we are envious or jealous, as we discussed yesterday, and sometimes we dislike someone, or we become angry at someone, but we're the ones who are disturbed by it, and therefore we're the ones who are punishing ourselves. So we punish ourselves by our own bad qualities, and we reward ourselves by our own good qualities. And like sometimes someone may say, or a devotee may say, but it's so difficult sometimes to not be envious or not be jealous, or it's so difficult sometimes to manifest good qualities. To which I say, but it's more difficult not to. Yes, it takes effort to detach from certain emotions that are toxic, that are unfavorable for bhakti, but it's more painful to not detach from them. So you say, well, it's difficult to give up envy. I would say it's more difficult. It's more difficult to live a life if you're envious of others than it is to give it up. So yes, giving it up takes effort. Remaining envious doesn't take any effort. It's our conditioned nature. But the consequences of being envious are much more difficult than whatever difficulty we have to undertake to detach from envy or lust or our hate or whatever it is we're trying to detach from or purify. So I think it's important to remember that, because often this excuse is given, yes, I'm conditioned, it's very difficult, how can I be forgiving, how can I be not envious, how can I like this person who I don't like, how can I be favorable towards someone who does things that are upsetting. Well, just meditate on the fact that if you're not, you're the one who will suffer. So everyone, as we know, everyone has some redeeming valuable qualities. So if we choose not to meditate on their good qualities, but we choose to meditate on their bad qualities, we're the ones who suffer. And so we inflict pain on ourselves because of what we choose to focus on. Isn't that interesting? A lot of times devotees will say, but how can, if I see this fault, and how can I not see it? And if someone's doing something wrong, how can I not notice it? And you maybe you can't not see it, and maybe you can't not notice it. But the question is, what do you do after you see it, or after you notice it? How do you respond to it? Do you focus on it? And do you allow that defect or fault to infect you with a critical mentality? Yeah, if you do that, then you'll suffer. And so, as again I said, you might say, yeah, but it's so difficult, I'm always critical, or whatever it is I find difficult to not do. I'm always envious, or I'm always this or that. Okay. But you're punishing yourself by that mentality. So perhaps you might think, well, even though it's difficult to give up certain feelings I have towards others, maybe if I'm more kind to myself, more generous on myself, I won't think that way. Because otherwise I'm just punishing myself. And as we've said many, many times, and as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has said many, many, many times, you can't really do anything to help another person. You can only help yourself. So by contemplating the faults of another, it can't really help you. But by correcting yourself, then there's some benefit there. So that's the idea. Okay, so we're going to read now. Sometimes when we hear, so this is a purport around the conversation or the actual fact that Dhruva went to the forest, but before he went to the forest, he discussed with his mother, and the conclusion was, well, if you meet God, you can ask him to fulfill your desire. And his mother said, well, the sages, they go to the forest to meditate, and that's how they see God. So Dhruva said, okay, that's what I'll do. So here's a purport. Sometimes when we hear that great sages and devotees go to the forest and engage themselves in devotional service or meditation, we become surprised. How can one live in the forest and not be taken care of by anyone? But the answer given by a great authority, Narada Muni, is that such persons are well protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sharanagati, or surrender, means acceptance or firm belief that wherever the surrendered soul lives, he is always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is never alone or unprotected. Narada Muni, after he met Dhruva, as the story goes, he tested Dhruva. He said, Dhruva, this is not a place for a 5-year-old boy. It's dangerous here. And this is very difficult what you're trying to do, and you're too young to do it. And the understanding was he was testing Dhruva to see how determined he was. And he really wanted to help Dhruva, but he wanted to test him to see if he was qualified. And sometimes when a devotee would ask Srila Prabhupada for sannyas, Prabhupada would try to dissuade him. No, you don't need it, and so forth. And it was a test. Then to see if the devotee could convince Prabhupada. Although sometimes Prabhupada said, they're bothering me asking for sannyas. But still, Prabhupada would test them. Why do you need sannyas? This and that. So anyway, so after Narada tested him and was satisfied, he gave him the mantra Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, told him to chant that mantra. And then Narada went to his father, Uttanapad, and told him that your son is in the forest alone. And Uttanapad was already lamenting or regretful of his behavior towards his son because it was improper. And now he heard that his son was in the forest alone. So he was very concerned and very upset. And mostly he was worried that his son might be eaten by an animal, killed by an animal, tiger or whatever. And then Narada Muni explained to Uttanapad, he said, you don't have to worry, because Dhruva, he's surrendering now to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and so he will be protected. So a 5-year-old boy in the forest, and Narada Muni is telling his father, don't worry about him. He's protected by Krishna. Nothing bad can happen to him now. Isn't that interesting? So that's what the point Prabhupada's making here, and that's the point that Narada Muni made to King Uttanapad. Once you're surrendered, you're protected. And then whatever happens to the surrendered soul is perfect. And even if it seems it's not perfect, if the devotee is surrendered to Krishna, if the devotee is pure, then whatever happens, we accept it as perfect. It's exactly the right thing. Sometimes we see that everything is good. Sometimes we see that when a devotee becomes Krishna conscious, so many good things happen, but we always, sometimes we see that something not so good happens. But the devotee, he always feels that whatever happens is good. There's some reason it happened for some benefit. There's something to learn. Or in some way I'll become purified. So the surrendered soul always feels Krishna's protection. Now, one who's not completely surrendered may doubt Krishna's protection in some situations, either out of fear or because something happened and they doubt that they were being protected. But the surrendered soul will see everything as Krishna's moving him and moving situations around him to create the best ultimate benefit for that devotee. So what does Prabhupada say? Saranagati means acceptance or firm belief that wherever the surrendered soul lives, he is always protected. and he is never alone or unprotected. And Prabhupada said, when he first came to the United States, Prabhupada said, I never felt that I was alone. I felt that my spiritual master was always with me. So that's the attitude of a pure devotee. They always feel that they're protected. And Dhruva Maharaj said that you can't really protect yourself. If you're not protected by Krishna, you can't protect yourself. And if you're protected by Krishna, you don't really need to protect yourself. That was Prahlad Maharaj's own experience. Look what happened to him. He couldn't be killed. He was protected. So, but of course, there's another point here. What does Prabhupada say? Firm belief, that one has this belief. So, sometimes I've seen, this is just not from Bhagavatam, but it's my own experience, that if someone has faith in Krishna and puts themselves on a limb, Krishna takes care. If someone doesn't have faith, then Krishna responds with the lack of faith. So you don't have faith that I will take care of you? Okay, I won't take care of you. You'll have to do it all yourself. You think you're doing it all. And there's a purport in which Prabhupada said, you think you're making money by working. He said, no, your money is already supplied by Krishna. Everything is already ordained and supplied by Krishna. It just looks like you're doing it. It doesn't mean that we don't make an effort. It doesn't mean we don't try, we just sit around and do nothing. But the attitude of a devotee who has faith in Krishna is that everything is provided for the surrendered devotee. And if we lack faith to that degree that we lack faith, then there'll be a lack in our life. A lack of whatever. But to the degree we have faith, Krishna will respond. So Krishna Karshani asks a question. What if, even if we want not to be envy, but still, we are noticing that from time of feeling envy, envy is coming back. I heard that we are not able to remove lust completely. All we can do is tolerate it and not following our lusty desires. I was wondering if with envy is the same. We can't remove it completely because we are living material world, and what can we do is tolerate this feeling and observing this feeling. The answer to that question would be relative to the person. So, for some people the answer is yes. And for some people the answer is no. They're not free from envy, but they're free from allowing envy to from allowing envy to in any way infiltrate their consciousness to any significant degree, because they've purified themselves, or as I was saying, they've analyzed it, they've understood that envy is destructive, and so they've been able to alter their consciousness in a way that they just won't allow themselves to become envious. So it's similar to the answer you've given, that if envy arises, or lust, or whatever it is, we should tolerate it. In other words, we shouldn't act on it. But if we're more evolved in our Krishna consciousness, then the frequency or the strength of that envy, the strength of that lust will be decreasing. And even before we're very elevated to the point that we're free from lust and envy, or the lust and envy is reduced significantly, we can still, by some kind of gyan, you could say, some kind of reflective, introspective knowledge, we can make internal decisions that I won't entertain envy. And there are ways that this can be done. I won't entertain lust. Just like in Srila Prabhupada's books, he describes the effects of envy or anger or lust. So by studying that, it's a kind of gyan where we can detach, or we can make a determination that I'm not going to allow envy or lust or anger to infiltrate my consciousness. So it doesn't mean that we're pure devotees completely detached, but it means that we've analyzed the situation in a way, and through the strength of intelligence, we've made decisions to not allow this to infiltrate my consciousness. It's really the way knowledge works, that you can understand something. Well, let's say, like, you understand, a doctor explains to you why eating certain foods is bad, and he's telling you, well, you feel the way you feel because this is how this food is affecting you. You feel sluggish, or you need to sleep a lot, or you can't just jump out of bed. You don't feel refreshed after you sleep. You don't feel like exercising. He said, well, that's because your liver is sluggish because you're eating these foods and they're hard to digest, etc., etc. And some of those foods are foods you like a lot and you've been eating all your life. And he explains it in such a way that it's so clear that you decide, okay, I'm not going to eat these foods. We see this happen all the time. People make dietary decisions, either based on losing weight or health, or just they're seriously ill and they have to. So they understand and they make a decision, I'm not going to do this. So if we understand the effects of envy, the effects of lust, the effects of anger, how polluting it is to ourselves, to others, how it's debilitating my Krishna consciousness and so forth, we can make decisions that, okay, I'm just not going to be envious. I'm not going to allow myself to be envious. And what that can do, at least I've seen within myself, what that can do is actually change your attitude in such a way that where previously you might be lusty or greedy or envious or jealous, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that you're free from lust, greed, and envy. It just means that you've developed an attitude which kind of neutralizes the catalyst for these problems. So let's say normally I'd see somebody I don't like and I would think a certain way. But now I've decided I would rather just think favorably towards all devotees because it's better for my relationships and it's better for my own sanity. And so I adjust my thinking. And it's not that I don't see the fault, but now at this point I've decided in my life I don't want to focus on it. I don't want to give in to it. So it's not so much of this is not so much tolerating, it's just that you don't have an attitude which generates those anarthas. The anarthas may still be there, but they don't say activate, not generate, activate. It just doesn't stimulate those anarthas. Because we all have anarthas, and situations stimulate those anarthas. But through knowledge, through making a decision not to give in to those anarthas because of how detrimental they are, then we can have attitudes in consciousness where typically something would disturb us and it no longer disturbs us because we made a decision. One decision we can make is to accept this is how this person is, or this is how our movement is, or this is how leadership in ISKCON is, or this is how anything is. It's just this is how it is. So why should I be upset about the way something is and I can't change it anyway? So, and even if I want to change it, still I shouldn't be upset about how it is, but I should work to change it and not allow my envy and so forth to get in the way. So you can test out my theory, make a decision, not to get angry or not to be envious or critical. And if you have good reasons and you have sufficient knowledge behind that decision, then it's going to work. If you don't have good reasons, you don't have sufficient knowledge, then the conditioned nature will tend to take over. So, hope that answered your question. Sadhyarupa says, how do we differentiate? I don't know. If it didn't answer your question, or it's not clear to everybody, or not anybody, if it's not clear to any one of you, then ask it again, or ask for clarification. It's about, a lot of what happens to us and how we react to the world is based on decisions we make on how we choose, or we're going to choose, to focus, how we're going to choose to what's going to be a priority in our life. So, is envy going to be a priority? Is criticism going to be a priority? And you may decide, no, at this point in my life, it's not going to be a priority at all. I'm not going to give into it. I've given into it so many years of my life, and now I see how detrimental it is. I don't want to give into it. So it's no longer a priority. It's no longer important. There are other things that are more important. I would rather be generous. I would rather be appreciative. I would rather be forgiving than resentful and critical and envious. So you'd be surprised at how powerful a decision can affect you. So I would say, from my own experience, that decisions have very powerful effects on our consciousness, but what is difficult is coming to the point of making that decision. I mean, actually making it, not just saying, okay, I'm not going to be envious, but actually making a decision based on your own experience and knowledge of how detrimental it is and how distasteful it is to be critical or envious or so forth. And it gradually no longer becomes a part of the way you think, and it no longer becomes a part of your attitude. It's no longer a part of your persona. You've cleaned it out. It's not something you want to carry with you. So, as I said, it's there, but you're not giving access to it anymore. And then as you become more Krishna conscious, gradually, it goes away. So before it goes away, you have to make a decision not to give into it and not to focus on it. And by doing that, it will go away more quickly. So it works in many ways for you. So Satyarupa says, how do we differentiate if we have faith in Krishna, or if we're just trying to escape being practical? That's a very interesting question, and I don't know if we can give a general answer outside of a specific situation. But the general generic answer that we would give, based on what Prabhupada taught us, was that you make the effort, but you put more credence, more belief in the fact that Krishna is the controller, then your effort is going to make it successful. So, like, for example, when we were young devotees, we questioned when we were ill if we should even go to a doctor or just have faith in Krishna. So Prabhupada said, Krishna, ultimately it's up to Krishna if we'll be cured, but he said that you should pray to Krishna and at the same time go to the doctor. So do what's practical, at the same time don't give up your faith and put all your faith in the doctor, because ultimately it's Krishna. Krishna can use the doctor. Now sometimes we will see that one devotee has more faith than another devotee. And he may say, I have faith that Krishna will heal me. I don't need to go to a doctor. And in some cases that works. And in some cases it doesn't. And it may be because that decision wasn't practical, and it may be because one devotee had greater faith than another. And this topic of faith versus what's practical, in my mind and my heart, it requires days and days of discussion. Because my realization, my experience is a lot of what happens to us is a result of our faith. And so the faith or lack thereof of faith is confirmed by what's happening to us in life, in the world. And so Krishna he often, I'm sure you've seen this in your life, he often fills in the blanks, so to speak. When you have faith and there's a situation you can't resolve, and then he resolves it for you, or he guides you, or somebody resolves it, somebody helps you. So because you have faith, but faith can border on foolishness and impracticality, wherein you try to do something that you're totally unqualified to do, or might be dangerous to you or dangerous to another person. And you say, have faith in Krishna. He'll drive the car even if I fall asleep. Obviously, that's foolish. Or I have faith that Krishna will keep me awake, even though I'm tired. And what's practical? Well, if you're very tired and you're driving, especially if you're alone, it's late at night, what's practical is drive off the road and take rest. And no, but I have faith Krishna will keep me awake. Perhaps if your faith is very strong and you have experience that you've never fallen asleep driving because of that faith, yes. But we've lost a number of devotees to car accidents because the devotees fell asleep. So it's a difficult question to answer because it's very subjective, based on situations and based on the faith of an individual. But what Prabhupada's saying in this purport is that Krishna's protection is there for the surrendered soul. And what does he mean? Well, in the context that Prabhupada was speaking is Dhruva Maharaj is living in the forest. And what's another example? Prabhupada coming to New York. That was also a forest, an unknown forest for Prabhupada. Right? So Prabhupada really, he really pushed us to go around the world and preach. And we saw that Krishna would always take care of the devotees somehow or other. Somehow we would live, somehow or other we would eat, even though we might go somewhere with nothing. So, is that practical? Is that impractical? In today's ISKCON we might say, well, that's a bit impractical. But it would also depend on situations and depend on the level of faith that a devotee has. So that's why it's difficult to answer this question. I don't want you to jump off a 10-story building because you have faith that Krishna will protect you. But there are other things that you could be doing that you're not doing because you lack faith. So that I think really this is a question we all have to answer ourselves. Am I just being practical, or am I lacking faith? Okay, I'm going to Mexico tomorrow, and I have a ticket. I could just show up in the airport out of faith and say, well, let's see if there's a ticket, and if I go standby, maybe I can save a lot of money. But we're doing a concert Wednesday night, and people are paying for the concert, and we've rented a theater and so forth, so it would be impractical if I do this all in faith, that, well, if Krishna wants me to do the concert, he'll provide. Yeah, okay, that's one way. But Prem Kishore bought the ticket, that's the practical way. So I can say, okay, Krishna provided. So obviously there's some things which would be impractical to be replaced by faith. Right? But it's not really what Prabhupada's explaining here in the purport of practical details in your life. Prabhupada was very practical. So he wanted us to be practical. Prabhupada's talking more about maintaining our life, being able to live, that have faith. We have faith. And the other aspect of faith is that whatever I need for my spiritual life is there within Krishna consciousness. So I don't have to endeavor separately. I don't have to worship demigods. I don't have to do so many pujas and yagyas. Chanting Hare Krishna and serving Guru and Krishna, doing my sadhana, doing my seva, that's sufficient. I'll get everything from that. So that's another aspect of faith. That if I do this process, Prabhupada said, I could be dancing with Krishna. I was just hearing this amazing lecture by a godbrother of mine, and he was saying that when you think about what Mahaprabhu was doing, and what Gadadhar Pandit, the Gadadhar Pandit, his appearance day I think is May 4th coming up, so I've been reading a bit about Gadadhar Pandit. And Gadadhar Pandit is Radharani. And so now Radha and Krishna have come as Gadadhar Pandit and Lord Chaitanya, and their mood is different. They're not engaging in amorous affairs with one another. They're both coming in male forms, and Mahaprabhu is in the mood of Radha, not Krishna, so they're not coming as Radha and Krishna as individuals, but they're coming to give mercy. And he said something so beautiful. He said, actually, they're coming to recruit people. They're coming to get new recruits for the Rasa Leela. Lord Chaitanya, Gadadhar Pandit, you could say the whole Panchatattva, Nityananda Prabhu, they're coming to recruit people for the Rasa Leela. And how are they recruiting people? Through chanting Hare Krishna. So isn't that beautiful? That we're going out also preaching to recruit people for Rasa Leela. What an amazing meditation. Isn't it? So that's a kind of faith that by chanting Hare Krishna that I can become qualified for Rasa Leela. So there's practical aspects of sadhana we have to do, but at the same time, there's faith that the Maha Mantra will make me qualified to dance with Krishna. So that's a kind of faith also, that Maha Mantra is all I need. And some service, some sadhana, that's all I need. Hearing Bhagavatam and associating with devotees. Chanting the holy name, living in a holy place, worshiping the deity, that's all I need. So that's a kind of faith. And the power and effect of our devotional service is increased the more there's faith. Now you might say, well, faith increases as we advance in devotional service, and that's true. But like everything either increases as we advance or the bad things decrease. But it doesn't mean that we don't work on our own to increase the good and minimize the bad. That we also do. So they work together. Your faith will increase as you advance, but at the same time, through knowledge, through hearing and praying and so forth, you're trying to increase your faith at the same time. Because as your faith increases, it speeds up the process that will increase your faith more. As you act humbly, it speeds up the process by which you will naturally become more humble. So they work together. So I think we see that some devotees have more faith than others, and that may be due to their past devotional activities. But still, as I've often said, that where there is a chance, where you're faced with a situation when there's a chance to exhibit more faith, do it. Say, I don't know, I'm worried, maybe I can't do this. Take the plunge, take the step, and see if Krishna doesn't come in and catch you. And he always does. And in order for us to build that faith, we need to make a step, a difficult step, go out of our comfort zone, or jump off the cliff and see if Krishna will catch us. So if you're ever in a situation where you see your faith is waning or your faith isn't strong, my recommendation is take that step. Walk into that fear. Don't be impractical. Don't drive with your eyes closed. But take a step where we're not talking so much about whether it's practical or not, but whether it's a lack of faith or not. Take that step into faith. So I think perhaps the best answer to your question is where you know you're lacking faith, and it's not a matter of something practical or not. It's a lacking faith. It's a step you need to take. It's another step that you're afraid to take. Take it. And that will build your faith, because you'll see by taking that step, Krishna will come and catch you. And the problem is, when we don't take that step, what often happens is we've either lost an opportunity to strengthen our faith, or we've done something that will weaken our faith, because we backed away from a situation where our faith was being tested and we failed. And so our faith now becomes weakened. So that's something to meditate on. Okay. Govinda says, it's easy to accept we have lust, but difficult to accept we have envy. Yeah. Well, that's because of our ego. And that's also, We identify ourselves as devotees, and devotees aren't envious. So that's what makes it difficult to acknowledge that we're envious. Well, is there any devotee that has something you would like to have? Or is there any devotee that has something you wish they didn't have and you had? It shouldn't, the way we are meant to see these things, lust, anger, greed, envy, and so forth, is that as conditioned souls, these are our so-called ornaments. This is what we wear. These are the weights that are holding us. Yeah, let's not call them ornaments. These are the weights that are keeping us on the earth. So, if we have a material body, that's because we're envious. I mean, if we're born in this world, it's because we're envious. And when we're no longer envious, we're pure. So until we're completely pure, obviously some envy is there. But there's I don't know if you know this, hepatitis C. I don't know if they have, I think now they have a very expensive cure for it, but previously, before, it's like $40,000 to cure it. It's crazy. But in Chinese medicine, I know this because my neighbor has it, and he said that you can't cure it, but you can do things so it doesn't cause you any problems. So you can take certain herbs, so basically the hepatitis C is still there, but it doesn't affect you. I don't understand physically how that happens. But the disease is there, but you've kept the disease at bay. It's not activated. Does that make sense? It's like you have yeast for bread, but you don't do anything to activate the yeast, so it doesn't grow. Something like that, like a culture that doesn't grow. So it's a bit like that. As conditioned souls, we have envy, lust, and so forth. But through Krishna consciousness, it doesn't get activated. So that's, if you want to be embarrassed, or if something is difficult to accept, it shouldn't be that it's difficult to accept that we have envy or jealousy or lust. What would be more difficult to accept, and what would be purifying to accept, is that I'm giving in to my envy and lust. I'm activating it. I'm doing things that activate it. That we should be embarrassed about. That we should have difficulty with. Not that we have it. That's just the qualification for having a material body. If we didn't have envy, why would we take birth here? So we should be willing and able to accept that we have envy and jealousy and lust and greed and so forth. But what should be difficult to accept is that we're giving into it. We're activating it. Right? Does that make sense? And if you have more questions for clarification, then you can ask. So Katie is asking, how can we help others deal with envy? You may not be able to help others deal with envy, and perhaps the best way to help others is not to be envious, to be humble ourselves. And by seeing that, they'll become purified. Otherwise, you can't just go up to someone and say, Prabhu, I've been noticing you, and I'm definitely convinced you're envious, and I'm here to help you, because as everybody knows, I'm not envious of anybody. I don't think that's going to work. But what I have seen is that whenever a devotee exhibits a specific quality, by exhibiting that specific quality, he actually makes it difficult for others to not exhibit that quality, to exhibit qualities contrary to that. Because let's say I'm proud, let's say you're proud. And because we're both proud, we kind of don't notice. It's just normal. That's just normally how we are. But if a very humble devotee comes in, his behavior is so different from ours. Immediately we can see, oh, we were not behaving properly. But previously we thought, well, we're just behaving normally. This is how we always behave. So when we act in a non-envious way, it generally will become more obvious to an envious person. Maybe not initially, but at least it provides contrast to their behavior. I don't know if you've seen this, but have you ever seen a devotee who's in a particular situation and he acts in a very, or she acts in a very Krishna conscious way, in a way that you reflect that you would not have acted that way, or you would have found it difficult to act that way, or you definitely know you would have never been able to act that way. And then you reflect on that. Yes, this is the way to act in this situation. I would have not acted that way. I appreciate this so much. And you register that, you make a note of that this is how to deal with this situation. Have you ever been in a situation like that? I've seen that many times when you're around very advanced devotees, and sometimes you'll be surprised how they respond in particular situations, or how when a specific controversial topic is discussed, how they respond, which often is much different from the way we respond, or from the way many devotees would respond. And then we immediately understand, oh, this is how to deal with this situation. None of us were dealing with it this way. Only he or only she understood it this way. Ah, I can see how envious I am now. I can see how proud I am. I can see how much I'm trying to control what I can't control. Like that. So now, and that was the answer that Prabhupada gave. He said, if you don't like the way others are acting, then act the way you would like them to act, and they'll see that. Because association is very powerful, and we are very affected by those we associate with. So it does have an effect. Of course, you want to help someone with their envy, then yeah, the first thing is you yourself, help yourself with your envy before you help anybody else. That's always the plan. And how can I help anybody with anything unless I'm purifying myself of that anartha? I can't really do any much benefit for anyone if I myself have the same disease that they have. And how will I cure them if I can't even cure myself? So that's the idea. Not easy, but it's actually a blessing if we have to be exemplary. So if I accept that in order to help someone I have to be exemplary, that's a blessing because it forces me to practice. And so now I'm forced to not be envious because I see it's the only way I can help others. So Andrea has a question. The fact that something we can't change makes us angry, yes. Maybe part of ego speaking. I mean, our ego speaking about or wanting to control everything. Yeah, there are different reasons we become angry, and not being able to control is one of the major reasons. Now, this is interesting to meditate on because one of the first things we learn from Bhagavad Gita or when we come to the temple is there is someone who's the supreme controller, but it's not us. Okay, you probably learned that very early on in your Krishna consciousness. If you read Bhagavad Gita, you've definitely learned it. There is someone who is the supreme controller. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, it's not us. Now, the reality is we haven't really learned that because we're desperately, continually trying to control people or situations which we cannot control. A lot of times when you look at arguments between two people, it's because they're trying to control one another or they're pointing out what they don't like about another person. I wish you weren't this way, which means I would like to, if I could, change you. If I had the power to change you, I would, but I can't. So I'm frustrated because you are a certain way and I don't like the way you are. Isn't it? Why do you do that? I asked you not to do it and you still do it. Or why didn't you do that? I asked you to do it and you didn't do it, etc. Or they're getting upset with you. Why do you have to get upset with me? You're always getting upset. So the fact is that we haven't really learned that we're not the supreme controller or not some degree of controller. And that's a big lesson to learn. And so when you get frustrated, Andrea, because things don't go your way, then take a step back and think, okay, I still haven't learned that I'm not the controller. I'm still not accepting that I'm not the controller because right now, this situation has not worked out the way I wanted to. Friday, I got a call from my mother-in-law. She was trying to reach my wife, but she couldn't, and there was an emergency, and she calls me up and she said, Johnova's brother, her son, was found dead on the floor of the apartment. She lives with him. They live together, and she came home. She went out, she came home, and he wasn't up, and she went in the room, and so we just get this call out of the blue that he died. We don't know why, but he was lying on the floor dead. So, and the immediate reaction is, can I change that? Can I bring him back to life? Can we turn the clock back before that happened and go back and change it? That's the immediate reaction of people who are close to that person. No, it can't be. This didn't happen. It's a dream, or not a dream. It's a nightmare. We have to be able to undo this. Is there any way we can undo this? That's the first reaction to many people. It's a shock, right? You don't expect it. You expect, he'll die 20 years from now. He won't. He's too young to die. And then, so what sets in after, the next thing that sets in is that I have to accept that. It happened, I can't control it. And it's difficult to accept it, isn't it? No, but this actually happened. But did it really happen? Am I just dreaming? And so they say when a person finds out that they're going to die, and it's probably often true when you find out someone near and dear has died, is that you go into denial. No, it's not true. So that just shows how difficult it is for us to accept what's happening, right? And that's what we're learning as devotees. That's one of the main things we're learning, is we're trying to learn, we're trying to adapt to the reality that this is how it is. I was told that Kudambakananda Swami a couple years ago had prostate cancer, and when you get the diagnosis, first you say, we have prostate cancer. Well, how bad it is. Well, we have to do tests. So you're sitting there thinking, all right, is it stage 1, 2, 3, 4? How long am I going to live? Can they take it out and I'll be okay? Is it too late? It's going to spread throughout my body. I believe it was Jayadvaita Swami told me. Yeah, Jayadvaita Swami told me. He said, well, Maharaj was so Krishna conscious, he was thinking, well, if it's time to end, then it's time to end. Then we just accept that. That's what it is. Amazing, isn't it? So that's, Maharaj has learned that he's learned the lesson. That's the lesson we're all supposed to learn. I'm not the controller. And it's a hard lesson to learn. And we just had this on Friday. This just happened suddenly. And we were with him. When were we with him? We were with him about, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago. We went down to visit, and he was there, and we were with him. And I was thinking, well, at least he got to be around devotees and see devotees. But still, it's kind of a shock. You're with somebody, and now you'll never see them again, and they're just not there anymore. And you know, their clothes are there, their things are there, they're just not there. And it's hard. It's difficult, right? Isn't it? So we're trying to learn that lesson. And as you rightly said, Andrea, so much of our anger comes from what we can't control. And sometimes people in this situation, they become angry with God because how could God allow this? He was probably like 57 or 56, maybe 57. How could God allow this to happen? It's not fair. God should not have allowed this to happen. Right? We can think like that. This is completely unfair. It shouldn't. It's not right, and then you become angry with God. So, yeah, it's a really good point. And so that's what we're trying to learn. We're trying to learn that we are not controllers. And although that sounds so simple, doesn't it? I know we're trying to learn that. That was one of the first lessons I learned. It's right there in Bhagavad Gita. I'm not God. Okay. I'm not God. Yeah, that seems simple, but do we act like that? No. Do we understand it? How should I behave with someone who is envious and resentful to me? That's an interesting question. That would depend on the person and the situation. I mean, there are different answers we can give. One answer is just distance yourself as far as you can, and just understand that often in cases like this, that's just the nature of a person. And they may be resentful, and they may be envious of many other people. If that's true, that you see that they're actually acting this way towards others, then it's easier to detach because you can see it has nothing to do with you. It's just their nature, and you understand that that's how they are. And, like for example, there are certain devotees who are very critical of leaders in ISKCON. So if you're a leader, they'll criticize you. They'll find something about you to criticize you. And so you understand that's what they're going to do. So you don't take it personally. You don't think, oh, have I done something really bad? Now they're criticizing me because in Mangal Artik I didn't chant Prabhupada's pranam mantras. I only chanted Guru Vashtaka. And I went straight into Sri Krishna Chaitanya, and now I'm getting criticized as being not a follower of Prabhupada and being envious, or I didn't chant Jai Prabhupada at the end of Kirtan. You find people like that. This actually happened to me. As someone who was a Ritvik, and I didn't chant Namo Om at that particular arti. I always do, but the one they came to, I didn't. So then we understand, okay, it's the nature of the person that they have certain issues about Prabhupada being out of the center, and and when they see things like this, they're going to speak up and so forth. If that's not the case, and it's just with you, then you could also, it's possible you could also think, well, it's just, that's the nature of this person, that they're like that. Or you might think, well, let me see, did I do something that would cause them to be resentful? Or why are they envious of me? Did I take a position from them? Did I do something to push them down? and now they're fighting back. So, it's always good to reflect on that. Have I been the cause in someone's envy or being resentful to me? There's an interesting meditation. Because I teach forgiveness, this is one aspect of forgiveness, is that often when we become resentful in response to something someone has done, so they treated me this way, or they said this or that, and so they become resentful. I become resentful in reaction to their activity. Think, is what they did they initiate that, or are they reacting to something I did? Because we always think, well, I'm reacting to what they did. Or, of course I'm resentful. Look at how they treated me. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is, well, did you first initiate something? Did you initiate an action which caused them to do what they did? And so they're not the initial cause. You were the cause, and that's why they treated you this way, because you treated them that way. That's another meditation. Like I say, I don't know your situation, so I can't say. And of course, the most Krishna conscious way is to be kind and generous even to those who are envious and resentful. And maybe that will dispel some of that. Depending on your relationship, you could also talk to them and say, it seems like you're resentful or envious of me. What did is that true? And what did I do to you to cause that? And can we talk about it? So those are options. Sometimes the easiest and most practical option is just to not have interaction with that person, if that's possible. If it's your mother-in-law and she lives with you, obviously you have interaction. But if it's just a devotee in general, maybe they don't even live in your city, it's easier to just kind of avoid them. The other way of looking at it is that the person who is envious or resentful is just going through some difficulty themselves, and this is how it's coming out, and it's just coming out on you. But you can just kind of feel bad for them, that this is how they feel towards you. There's no reason to feel that way, but this is how they feel towards you. So just, kind of pray for them and hope that they can overcome it. And that way you don't take it personally. You just see it as a trouble they're having. It seems that most people are not making conscious decisions the way they want to feel or respond to certain feelings. Most of people seem to be mostly victims of conditioned feelings, yes. Most people seem to be mostly victims of the conditioned feelings they're having. It's very valuable advice to decide how we want to respond to certain things. Well, it's like, when you make goals, you plan certain things. So if you have no goals, then you don't really go anywhere, and you just, like, whatever happens, happens. So it's the same with emotions or attitudes. If you don't plan how you want to respond or engage with different situations, then it's just, you're going to be at the mercy of your own conditioned responses and emotions. That's true. And so, they have this principle called emotional intelligence. Or emotional intelligence is just emotional maturity, and emotional maturity is just controlling your emotion. Now, what's interesting is that we don't usually talk so much about controlling emotions. Or at least we don't use that. Maybe we talk about it, but we don't use that terminology. But like Krishna says in the Gita, the sadhus, they strenuously are trying to control desire and anger. So anger is an emotion. Our Shastra talks about being forgiving, not being resentful, so that's giving up, not being envious, and so forth. But it doesn't use the words like emotion, control your emotions, or emotional detachment. But what's interesting is that emotions are the feeling aspect of the mind. So the mind has three dimensions: thinking, feeling, and willing. Thinking, this is nice, feeling, I'd like to have it, willing, actually doing it. So if you look at emotions as a more subtle aspect of thought, then emotional control is just another way of saying mind control. Control your mind. Control the subtle aspect of your mind. Control yourself. So instead of saying control your mind, we might say control yourself, or we say control your senses. So, but actually emotions are subtle aspects of thoughts, when thoughts turn into feelings. When that's nice turns into, I feel that's nice. I feel it. So I've sometimes spoken about the concept of emotional detachment. I think it's important. And the idea is that we, just like we identify with the mind, the false ego identifies with the mind. And that's why we have so much trouble with the mind, because we think we are those thoughts, rather than thinking, it's just a thought. I don't have to do anything if it's not a thought that I want. So I'm thinking, oh, this woman or this man is very beautiful. Let me go talk to them. I will enjoy talking to them. And if we understand I'm not that thought, we just think, oh, that's a really stupid thought. So we just think, okay, forget that thought. I'm not going to act on that thought. That's really stupid. Right? So I detach from the thought. So I think that's clear to us. If you control your mind. But it's the same with emotion. Oh, I have this emotion. I feel like doing this. Well, that's not useful feeling. So I should let it go, or I should detach. I should not take that emotion to be me. Just like I don't take that thought to be me. Oh, that's a stupid thought. I don't want to act on that thought. Oh, that's a stupid emotion. I don't want to act on that emotion. So if you look at language, sometimes people will say, I'm really angry, or I'm really upset, or I'm whatever. I am this. Fill in the blank emotion. I'm afraid, angry, upset, I'm let down, and so forth. But actually, we're not angry or fearful or upset. We're just feeling those things. But when we say I am, that means we've identified with them. Just like we often identify with our thoughts, but we're not those thoughts. We know we're not those thoughts. We're spirit soul. Obviously, we're not those thoughts. Those are just thoughts. They come and go. They may identify us if we allow them to temporarily, but they come and go. So if I say I'm angry, it's not true, because what's actually true is I'm feeling anger. Isn't it? I feel angry, or I feel upset, or I feel this or that. That's what's happening. I'm not anger. I'm not upset. I'm spirit soul. Part and parcel of Krishna, eternal servant. That's what I am. I'm the conscious being that's experiencing the anger. So if that's true, if I am the conscious being experiencing the anger, then I have the choice to experience it in different ways or to let it go. Of course, it's easy to say that, because once we become angry, it's a lot harder to do that. But I've often explained the concept of, well, the choice doesn't really come in the moment when somebody slaps you in the face. That it's harder to choose at that point. But if walking into a difficult situation, if you made the choice that even if they slap me in the face, I won't slap back, I'm not going to get upset, then it's easier to do, because you've already made that decision. You already put yourself in that frame of mind. Which goes back to the first thing I was saying, is about making decisions about how you want to behave, creating proper attitudes. Okay, there's a devotee in this temple who is envious of me and resentful, but I'm making a decision that I'm not going to allow that to affect me. I'm just going to have I'm going to try to like that devotee and understand that that devotee is just challenged with these anarthas. And so when you make that decision in advance, then when you're in the association of that devotee, it's easier to deal with it. So it's easier to detach from your emotion, or when that emotion comes, starts to well up in you, it's easier to just pull back and let it go. So that's something you have to meditate on, because this is both what I've studied, but it's both what I've put into practice. So I'm sharing with you what I've put into practice. And my realization is that in your sadhana, it's where you want to develop these abilities to be detached emotionally and develop proper attitudes. It's not when you go out in the battle that you're going to be able to do it. But you're going to have to do it before. Like, military men are trained, so when they go into combat, they're ready for it. Of course, they're never really ready. They don't know exactly what it'll be like, but they're trained in combat situations. So when you go out, or a boxer is a better example. He trains, so when he goes in the arena, he's ready for the fight. So they say that he wins the fight in practice, not in the arena. So we win the fight in the world in our sadhana, in our hearing and chanting. That's where we win it. Not when we go out and think, okay, I have to deal with this. How do I deal with it? You have to be ready to deal with it before you go out. So if you understand emotional detachment, emotional control, emotional maturity, if you've made decisions to act in certain ways and not react in other ways, then it's much easier to deal with it. Or even I could say easy to deal with it. Jai Jagannath, Jai Radhapriya, Jai Mona, Acharya Das. Really happy to tune into this discourse. When devotees call me names like stupid for something I haven't done, or they denigrate me in some other way which is clearly undeserved, in that situation, is it criticism to see that they're wrong and how to keep good relationships with them, or is it better to keep distance? I would say the answer depends on the relationship, the situation, and you. Because one question comes to mind, what you were describing, a person who's calling you stupid and denigrating you, naturally I was thinking, why would anybody want to associate with someone who deals with them that way? Of course, if you're married to that person, or that person's a relative and you live together, it's hard to avoid. But if you have a choice, then choose your friends wisely. One of the things that's very important in our life in general is that we have the association of people who uplift us. So for some of us, if someone calls us stupid and denigrates us, some of us would just laugh and think, that's just what that person does. It's kind of funny. But if it's actually having a detrimental effect on us, then definitely we have to deal with it in some way. Either ask them, tell them that, these denigrating remarks are really hurting me, and if you could avoid them, that would really help me. I need to be encouraged. Now, if that's your guru telling you that, that's another issue. He may be doing that because you really did something stupid, and you need to be more conscientious. That's another thing. Or if it's your father, it may be similar. So it depends who's telling you that. But a constant barrage of criticism, for most of us, will have a very bad effect, because we'll start to believe it, or we'll just become angry. So you're asking, should I keep a good relationship with them? The question is, how important is a good relationship? I personally, if I had to have the relationship, then I would try to be aloof as far as possible, because nobody likes to be criticized and denigrated. And I would try to have very little to do with them, because unless I was at fault and when they were correcting me, then I would say, okay, then that association is good. But if it's just their nature to denigrate and criticize, it's probably, for most of us, would have a debilitating effect. And if some of us have a tendency towards low self-esteem, then to be around people like that is really bad, because we already feel stupid and we already feel somewhat useless. So to have a person telling us you're stupid and useless, that just confirms what we're feeling, and it is very destructive. So I would definitely say, if you're dealing with any kind of lack of self-confidence or lack of self-esteem, being around people like that is really bad for you. You really want to be around uplifting people, which of course is true in general for all of us. We want to be around people who are inspiring us. And it doesn't sound like what you're saying is that this person is like an authority who's trying to help you. It sounds like it's their nature to put you down. So sometimes we have to choose our friends wisely. Jagannath. I'm looking to see if there's other questions. I'm just going through the whole list of devotees. Okay, Vidarbha. Thank you so much for these broadcasts, knowing that this material world is a place of suffering and there is danger at every step. And knowing that Krishna is Hari, or one who takes away our material attachments, how can one be fearless? How does one continue to feel grateful as the purification increases in intensity and becomes overwhelming? Well, actually I was thinking about this idea, a similar idea this morning, about what is overwhelming. Because as we know, what's overwhelming for me may not be overwhelming for you. What makes you happy may make me sad. What makes me happy may make you sad. So what does it mean that everything is Krishna's mercy? What does it mean that Krishna is protecting us? What does it mean that a devotee sees everything in the material world as happiness? It all requires perspective, because if we're overwhelmed by a situation, it probably means we need to see it in a different way, in a way that's not overwhelming. You know, I don't know your situation, but we've all seen people get overwhelmed by situations that we don't feel are overwhelming. And we've all seen people not get overwhelmed by situations that we feel are very overwhelming. So is the situation overwhelming or not? Or is it that the person is allowing themselves to get overwhelmed? So then what I would ask you is, how could you see a situation in a particular way that wouldn't overwhelm you? How could you see Krishna's hand in it, Krishna's grace, Krishna's love, Krishna's affection, Krishna's desire to move you in a certain way, Krishna's desire to help you understand something? How can you see that? So just like yesterday, it was kind of a Friday. It was kind of a shock. You just get this phone call, and we're all going to get these phone calls one day that some loved one is no longer here. Right? That's overwhelming, isn't it? One day. I mean, it's less of a shock if a person has a disease and in 6 months or so they're not going to be with us. You can prepare yourself. But that doesn't always happen. There's always going to be some shock in our lives. We're going to get a shock. So-and-so. When I was taking prasadam once, I was in Mumbai taking prasadam, and I got a call from my daughter. This was 5 years ago. They were on the way to the airport to go somewhere, and they got in an accident, and my wife was unconscious and bleeding, and my daughter's like 13 years old or 12 or something. She had to take charge of the whole thing. It was like, whoa, just... So, how do we process these things? How do we deal with these things? And Krishna, the beauty of Krishna, it's like when my wife's brother died, or my brother-in-law died. My wife and I were discussing and how fortunate it is that we're devotees, because it gives us perspective. So it makes it's so much easier to deal with these things, because we know he didn't die. He's just moving on to another body. So if we're being overwhelmed by a situation, we have to step back and say, wait a minute, but isn't our philosophy enabling us to deal with everything in a way that we wouldn't be overwhelmed? And if I am overwhelmed, doesn't it mean that I'm not applying Krishna consciousness correctly or sufficiently in this situation? And then we step back and we think, okay, so if I'm overwhelmed, how should I see this situation, or how should I deal with this situation so I won't be overwhelmed? Because that's the ultimate beauty of Krishna consciousness, is it gives us the ability to deal with anything. And that's what a non-devotee doesn't have. A non-devotee doesn't have that ability. So for us to become overwhelmed by material situations is unfortunate, because we have the tools with which to deal with them. Right? I want to clean the lens. The lens looks dirty. Hold on, everyone. You will not see me for a second. You will see a cleaning cloth. Is that any better? Or it's just the lighting? So, isn't it true? That's the real value of Krishna consciousness. Mm-hmm. The nature of these discussions is that the discussion keeps changing topic because people are commenting on something I said earlier. So I'm going to go to the next point. That's just a nice point to meditate on, that we, as devotees, we have a way of looking at the world, and also we have a way of help us deal with ultimately anything. So Krishna Karshini says, should we really care what others, including devotees, think or feel about us? Not everyone will like us, and some out of their issues will be envious of us, even hate us. Yeah, no matter what you do, that could happen. We should try to have as good as possible relationships with devotees, but it seems to be impossible. Yeah, well, in some cases, the devotee doesn't like you, so they don't want to have a good relationship, but it may be because they'll never like you, no matter what you do, or maybe because if you act in a different way, they'll like you. So those are the decisions you have to make. Vijay Lakshmi, one step further. When someone in the family issues, yeah. When someone in the family doesn't treat you properly, silent, ignore, what, they're silent, they ignore you, they don't get help, they don't help you when you're sick, it's difficult to ignore that. I would like to be away from them, but since it's family, sometimes it's not possible. Please advise. Yes, my advice for Indian families is very simple. I bless you to take birth in America in your next life. You won't have this problem. Hare Krishna. Easy solution, right? Vijay Lakshmi. I'm a little hesitant to answer because I'm not an expert on the internal workings of Indian families. I've been told about problems devotees in Indian families have, but I'm not an Indian, and I must never become part of a family to know the ins and outs, to best advise. But there's a principle that Prabhupada gave in regard to family in general, and that the principle is the principle of the first two principles of surrender. Do what's favorable and avoid what's unfavorable. So, your life is meant to be Krishna conscious, and you're not a young girl who has to worry about living her whole life with a family and making everything work. You're an older woman. And so you're preparing yourself to go back to Godhead. And so at this point in your life, you don't want to allow family issues to impede the peacefulness and sanctity of your own Krishna consciousness, or in any way impede your Krishna consciousness. So although you may want to make things work in the family as best as possible, you don't want to compromise your devotional service. So using that as a guideline to do what's favorable for bhakti, avoid what is detrimental, make decisions on how to deal with the family. And maybe they'll be pleased, maybe they won't, but you definitely don't want to please them at the cost of your Krishna consciousness and take another birth. So it's, these are tough decisions, and I don't know if I can make them for you. But as a general principle, you want to try to create a situation within your family that's harmonious and as peaceful as possible, so that everyone is happy and that you can execute your devotional service peacefully. If that's not likely to happen, or it's not easy for that to happen, then you have to make some decisions, and maybe they'll be tough, about what will be best for you and your Krishna consciousness. Now, it's nice that it would be best for you and best for them at the same time, but it's not always possible. So you have to consider your own needs, and you have to consider their needs. But if they're demanding that their needs be met at the cost of your spiritual life, then at this point in your life, I wouldn't recommend making those compromises, because your practice of Krishna consciousness now, you're in your later part of life. This is when it's most important. And so, earlier parts of life, sometimes we make compromises to raise families and so forth. But later life, it means now we're supposed to renounce vanaprast. We're supposed to renounce, all the family issues, so we can focus on Krishna consciousness. So that's all I can say for now, not knowing details. That's just general advice. I have to apply Krishna consciousness with family. I don't succeed. Pray to Krishna for some intelligence how to deal with it, some guidance. I think you might have to change some of the parameters of how you deal with the family, and you have to explain that to them, that these are the boundaries. The boundaries have changed. This is my condition, and these are my needs, and these are the boundaries, and that's all I can do. I think the video went out for a minute. It's just it's just internet. So, we didn't get to read much of Dhruva. Maybe we'll continue next week. I'm going tomorrow to Mexico. I don't know the schedule as far as classes and so forth. So I will find out. Next Saturday and Sunday, we're doing a retreat. Well, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So it may not be possible. Well, yeah. If I did it, yeah, it may be possible, because I think they may be doing a yoga class at this time. Then I could do it. Okay, so we'll see. We'll keep you posted. Hare Krishna. And today on the Alachua Sunday feast, I'm going to give a class, and I want to give a class on Dhruva Maharaj. So you've heard a lot. If you want to hear more, then, or maybe some of the same things we'll go over, you can tune into the Alachua. I won't broadcast it, but you can tune into Alachua, to their broadcast. I think it's just audio. And you can participate. That'll be 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Gauranga Nitana.